sure to keep the time and don't lose track. Dear colleagues, I'm happy to present our dimensional mode model and the mode cycle flashcard in front of such an impressive audience. I want to thank you for your interest in the results of our couples work group and all members of the work group for their feedback and their contributions. Because time is limited, please allow me to get straight into the core issues. That's a great view indeed. I've never seen it from this perspective. The traditional view on the modes is a more descriptive and categorizing one. In our work group, we developed the model into a dimensional and dynamic perspective, trying to connect it with neurobiological underpinnings, such as Dan Siegel, Brandy mentioned him already, describes them in his books. Therefore, we turned the mode model that Arnold uses 90 degrees. I will show you later. The most important modes and their interactions are represented in the so-called mode map. It's been already mentioned by Chiara and Wendy, and I'll show it to you now. Being somehow triggered, we react emotionally with child mode activations in a polarity between a vulnerable and an angry child mode. These are the core child modes as Jeff mentioned them yesterday in his workshop. We always continuously oscillate between these two poles depending on our physiological activations. If you know the Porges model of the vagal system, this is behind this idea. Stephen Porges described this model. In the child modes, we are always in contact with our primary or basic emotions, as Paul Ekman calls them, created by the activations of the limbic system. The core need of the vulnerable child mode is getting safe by being attached. In the angry or impulsive child mode, we strive for control and self-expression instead. Simultaneously, our cortical system of beliefs and internalized display rules is activated too. We call them the internalized parent modes. They are stored in the temporal and parietal mirror neuron systems of the brain cortex. Wendy mentioned it already. And this is represented in a dual way. First, as the voice of the punitive and demanding parents directed towards ourselves. And second, directed outwards as a blueprint that we internalized from the models of our parents or significant others, how to treat other people. The parents have served as a model too. The direction of the appraisal is constantly changing. When the voice turns outwards, the former victim might become an offender. This is interesting if you work with traumatized people. They often don't understand how they switch from being a victim, then suddenly towards their children, for example, show up with offending behavior. And this is easy to explain because the voice is directed towards themselves, and then they direct the voice, the punitive or demanding voice, towards the children or other persons. The activation of both systems is energizing. The activation of both systems, the energizing primary emotions and the direction-giving cortical appraisals converge in the orbital frontal cortex, where they are evaluated and actions prepared, resulting in coping modes as the currently most promising solutions. The coping modes can be localized in a spectrum between submission or internalization and dominance externalization. This is at the very bottom of the slide. I can see you can hardly see that there. Okay, but this is a spectrum. The coping modes are a spectrum. Let me take an example from everyday life. While I'm driving in a car, we might get angry about a driver in front of us. The angry child mode energizes our activation system, and the outward directed punitive parent calls the other driver stupid. The energy is directed into an overcompensation, example, blowing our horn. Oh, sorry, these are the coping modes. This is the spectrum of the coping modes. I forgot to show you. This is what Chiara mentioned in her presentation in the beginning. The four most important coping modes in the spectrum from surrender, the avoidant coping modes, and the overcompensating coping modes. Now we started with a driver. You get an overcompensation when you're angry, and the punitive parent is outwards directed. Then suddenly a police car shows up and we flip into a vulnerable child mode. And the punitive parent mode turns inside now, calling us, the stupid, getting another ticket. The anger is blown away and we approach the policeman in a submissive way. The most difficult situation is there's a clash between an angry child, which is trying to externalize, and a self-directed punitive parent mode. Then you get a high tension, high stress level. This is predominant in borderline patients, for example. And then maybe detaching or self-soothing, this means avoiding, is the best solution for this situation. We are too angry to submit, and we are too blocked by the punitive parent to fight. Both motivational systems are always activated in the background. The visible coping modes are accompanied by secondary or social emotions. So all secondary emotions like shame or feeling entitled belong to the coping modes. These are just the 6 basic emotions as Ekman named them. Following the arrows backwards, the mode map helps to access the hidden cognitions and core beliefs and the usually hidden primary emotions. The healthy adult mode is now in charge to reappraise the beliefs, correct them, and throw out the punitive parents, for example, and to fulfill the now realized core childhood needs in a functional, flexible, and adaptive way. So in the healthy adult mode box, you have the positive part of the surrendering mode, you have a functional form of detachment, as Wendy mentioned before, and you have, or Chiara did, sorry, and you have the capacity to soothe yourself in a functional way and to stand up for your rights in a functional way. So this is a functional and flexible integration of that what is in a dysfunctional separation here. Now let's focus on couple interactions. Regarding what my colleagues already outlined, couples chemistry is based on their favorite coping modes, often leading to maladaptive mode cycles. Based on the mode map, we developed a simplified mode cycle flashcard. It visualizes the couple's current mode cycles and the way out. And the most important, if you work with a couple, is focus on the form and not on the content, on the form of the interaction, and focus on the here and now interaction and not on something that happened in the past. This is what you already described. They will lead you from track. You're no longer on track if you focus on past experiences. Starting with the current trigger, Peter, I'll give you an example. Peter comes home late from work, letting Mary wait for more than 1 hour. Then you come to the predominant and obvious coping modes. Mary's coping mode is she yells at Peter, which is an overcompensation. Peter is hiding behind his computer, which is a detached protector. Or he gets off after she started yelling, he goes into his office and hides behind his computer. Now the next step is to look at the vulnerable, the child modes which are involved behind this coping mode. And if you look at Peter, he feels anxious. This is a vulnerable child mode. And then he starts detaching. The detachment of Peter makes Mary even more angry. Her obvious or overt child mode is anger, the angry child, which leads her into more compensation or overcompensation. And then you can follow the arrows and you have the mode cycle. And this can be perpetuated until the clash is escalating. Now the way out is actively to look for the not involved part of the child mode spectrum. You remember there are the 2 major child modes, vulnerable and angry child, and usually only one part of the child spectrum is involved in the current mode cycle. And what we have to do is, as Jeff mentioned, if you are in the emotional activation, you get trapped in this perspective. And what we have to do is we have to change into a healthy adult perspective and actively look for the other not activated child mode, which is, in the case of Mary, she's feeling alone. This is the vulnerable child. And when she's in the anger, she forgets about her vulnerable child. And the healthy adult now is getting involved after the couple clashes. They have to separate. And then in the healthy adult perspective, she is able to get in touch with the core need of being connected with Peter, and then she can approach him later and tell him that she's felt left alone. And this activates her abandonment schema. On the other hand, Peter, when he's in his anxious child mode, is tending to detach, and he needs to get in touch with his anger that he feels misunderstood by Mary because he has done nothing wrong. He just worked an hour longer because his boss asked him to. And he needs this anger power as the gas in the tank, as you mentioned that, Chiara, I think. He needs this anger power to stand up towards Mary and tell her that his yelling reminds him at his mother, and this makes him sad. But this needs, he needs to be empowered to do so. If he's only in touch with his anxiety, he won't be able to stand up against Mary. He will detach. So he needs the anger to approach her. And then after they have reconciliated, after they got in touch with their primary childhood experiences, then they're able to find a solution. And Mary doesn't feel so alone when Peter resists her anger. And Peter feels more like being able to face her. And he could promise, for example, to give her a call when he will be late next time, so she's able to make her own plans. She's not that depending on him. So, okay, we come to the final part. If you work with the mode cycle flashcard, it helps you, or it helps the couple to open up the dyadic, collusive perspective into a triadic, joint referencing perspective. Because when the couple clashes, they are focused like two dogs fighting each other. And when you have the mode cycle flashcard and bring it into therapy, they have to focus on this flashcard. And they get in a joint perspective, and they are more easily able to change in a working alliance. And this enables their healthy adult to come up and collaborate with the therapist. So the energy is directed towards this flashcard. And the couple understands that the problem is not the other partner, but it's the mode cycle. And they have to cope with the mode cycle and not fight the partner, because the mode cycle is a result of a dysfunctional interaction of both modes from both sides. It needs two to tango, and if you have these collusive mode cycles, they are the problem and not one partner or the other. And this helps them out of this dyadic fighting trap. So initially, we start filling out the mode cycle flashcard in session under the supervision of the therapist, and he catches bullets. This is the word that I learned from Travis. The therapist catches the bullets before they hit the other partner, and they need support to follow these steps from the triggering situation to the child mode, to the missing child mode, and to change perspective. What we sometimes do is that I stand up with both partners, having the chairs of the couple down, and then we make a reflecting team. We stand together, one partner aside, one or the other. You're in the middle to catch the bullets. And then we can look down, and you talk in the third person perspective and say, what does Mary feel when Peter comes home late? And then it's much easier if you use this two-level model that we have in the mode map as the emotional activation level, and you have the healthy adult above it. So you use the dimension, the vertical dimension of the mode map you use in the work with the couples when you stand up and change perspective. And these physical changes help to change your mental activation. And we try to use this is a psychodrama technique at least, but when you stand here as the reflecting team, it's much easier to develop these healthy adult solutions. So we use little tricks to get this confrontational perspective opened up into a third-person perspective, into a metacognitive perspective, into a top-down view on what is being acted out in the couple's activation. Okay. Oh, we're good in time. The next step is if the couple is trained in this changing perspective, in the feeling how it is to get out of the emotional activation trap, then you can give them the homework assignment that they stop when they clash. Whoever is the first who recognizes this clash, he gets off, he makes the break, and then they change rooms to get out of the triggering stimuli, switch into healthy adult perspective, fill out the mode cycle flashcard on their own separately, and they should not talk about it. They bring it in the next session. You discuss it with them in the session where you are controlling the game. And after you have done this for 5-6 times, they get a certain training in how to work with the flashcard. They learn to trust the flashcard. And then you can permit them to reconciliate after filling out the flashcard separately. And when they got a training of basic communication techniques, then you can help them to reconciliate on their own. And then they don't need you. After a certain time, they don't need you anymore, because they got trained by the technique, by the flashcard. This keeps them together and keeps them on track. And so the mode cycle flashcard paves the way out of the life traps for both partners and helps overcoming the old schema wounds. Yeah, thank you for listening to my presentation. And hope we see you in the General Membership Assembly. Okay, now there's time for some more questions. We have another mic.
Have this?
Yeah.
Or use this? Come on. And we'll pass the mic to whomever you'd like to address. I see a question back there. Go ahead.
We have another mic.
Bring it. Who is asking?
Hi. Just to thank you really and a comment. It's been very helpful to listen to all your great work and contributions to couples work. I was struck by the metaphors that you're using to the offender. And I work in the forensic population, and I'm often asked or challenged to sort of think, to work in a specialism that's forensic, it's so different from all the rest. And I'm sitting here thinking that's maybe our way of not, of compartmentalizing and pushing away the badness in individuals. But I'm encouraged by what you've talked about, and I think the usefulness of the modes and thinking about the couples can be thought of as the offender's relationship with the victim. And I just thought I'd share that and think we can take along the mode cycle and start to think about that and conceptualize that in forensic settings. So thank you. I don't know if anybody have any thoughts about that or experiences. That'd be helpful too. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that. One little thought that I have on that is, as I mentioned in my talk, as you work with an individual client that's severely fractured, especially like in the forensic setting, that's the same attitudes that you're bringing into with the couple. And that's the key that's so beautiful. It's actually taking all of the caring and the commitment that you have in the individual work and then bringing it into the couple and having a method that will allow you to do that because you're using these instruments like the mode cycle flashcard and the mode map. Next. Anyone else have a thought, a question, a sharing? Yes.
I just wanted to know at which session do you start educating on the modes, and do you ever have problems with that education process, that the couple are just so into their problems and screaming at each other, etc., that they just don't want to stop and start learning about modes?
Yes. Eckhard, would you like to address that?
Well, as I tried to point out briefly, I don't let myself be torn into those arguments of the patients, because there's no sense in it. It's not healing, it's hurting. So what I think we all do is we start with a lot of psychoeducation, you can give them handouts about the model. There's a lot of literature meanwhile. You can download things from the websites. And as I introduce it, and probably you all do that, we start telling them that we want to start something new. I don't want to be the participant of their old games. We want to start a new one. So we start very structured, very active, very directive, as you point out in your workshops. You have to catch the bullets. You have to stop them immediately. You have to be extremely active. And not every therapist is willing. You really have to go into them. When they start arguing, you have to hold your hand between them. This is why we have to sit so close together. You have to be able to touch them. So we are very structuring, very interfering at least, and you have to teach them in the beginning that they accept that. Many patients come in, or many couples come in with the idea they have to tell you the whole story, and then you're going to judge who's wrong or who's right or something like that. And this is a trap. I wouldn't go into that. I would explain to them the basic is there is a dysfunctional interaction, there's no wrong or right, you're both okay, but your interaction is toxic. So we explain in brief outlines the model, then we interrupt, and then we help them to get a new dance going. Is this okay? That's a brief answer.
I just wanted to make a comment on that too. I think that I find that if I'm working with couples, I want to observe just enough of their interaction, even their negative interaction, just to understand the pattern. But you can really begin to become very effective with them if you create rules pretty early on in the therapy. Help them to expect and to anticipate what your laboratory looks like when they enter it, what's going to happen in there, that you're going to interrupt, that it's going to happen. And it may feel uncomfortable for them. It will, because they want you, as Eckhard's saying, to be the judge and the jury on this, and that's not your role. So help them to anticipate what it is that they're going to be getting from the treatment that they're doing with you.
And just to add real quickly, one easy way to use the language is, at least for me, they've already filled out the questionnaires, the YSQ and the SMI, so during the feedback session they're wanting to know kind of what the key things are, so I'm not necessarily giving them a list of 18 schemas or all the different ways modes could be affecting their relationship, but I'm going to give them the core things, and also at least vulnerable child and angry child, so that we're going to see, well, when is this coming up in the cycle? And as we work in the future, in the treatment part of the therapy, we're going to help you to really understand how it's affecting and impacting your relationship. So, of course, you can't really overwhelm them right in the beginning, because it's true, they're in a very raw, vulnerable place themselves, but key things during feedback is very helpful to ground them.
I'd like to add to that the importance of having an individual intake and assessment of the schemas and at the beginning, at the onset, so that you're already starting to educate them about a definition of a mode. So when you already have this feedback session going, then they'll understand, and you bring them together, they already have some conceptualization of their own profile. So you already have that situation a little under control, because they have that self-understanding. Usually we'll take several sessions to do that.
Last question?
Yes, next question.
First, this is great, really helpful, practical. I was just struck actually by your talk, and you said the word again, dance. That's why I'm saying, because you didn't actually mention EFT, but I wonder if you when you're talking about, I could see it in her form, although this is great, this gives the underlying stuff. Can you just comment on that?
I'm sorry, I think I didn't get the question.
I just noticed that you talk about dance in terms of, but you didn't actually mention her stuff in terms of the EFT and how that fits in. Would you go on to use any of her stuff to kind of complement the mode map, or not?
Well, the answer is I've participated in a training, and I was very impressed by the idea of the dance and the terminology of withdrawer and pursuer. And we have a slightly different wording, because we call them the overcompensator and the detacher. In fact, Susan Johnson's words are more descriptive, but we took the words that we have from the mode model, and I think basically at that point this is almost the same thing. What she doesn't have in that way, from my point of view, is the distinction between the coping behavior and the vulnerable child behind it. In our work, this step from the coping modes to the underlying child modes and the unmet core needs, this is crucial for schema therapy. And this is basically different from her work somehow. She has this similar ideas, but I think the conceptualization as we have it of the mode model is quite precise, and people understand it very well. And I think we are all influenced by each other. We transformed the idea of the emotion-focused couples therapy a bit more, and connected it with the mode model and the schema model, and and our work with the reparenting and the nurturing the child and so on. As Travis described, that this is a core element, that the partners mutually nurture their vulnerable child. And this is different. This is not in that way in the emotion-focused model. As far as I know it, maybe I missed something. Now we have a little bit of time problems. What are we going to do? Wendy, you're the president. Yeah, we're having only a short break before the general membership assembly. So who has the strongest urge to ask? This is the shortest way to you.
Wendy, when you spoke about Linda and Charlie, you said they are both in individual and couple therapy. What you mean by individual? It is a schema therapy?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and with me. It's all under one roof.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, Chiara, final words?
Okay. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your interest, and I want to affirm my colleagues. What a wonderful job. Thank you.